Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. On this episode, we speak to Fahad Nazer, spokesperson for the Embassy of Saudi Arabia in Washington, who joins us just days after the Crown Prince's high-profile visit to the United States. The trip brought major developments on defence and nuclear power and has cemented Saudi Arabia's regional partner for peace and prosperity in the region. We ask him about all of that, plus details of the Saudi initiative to convince Washington to intervene and settle the dispute in Sudan, and much more. Mr. Nazer, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. It's lovely to have you back on the show. Now, you have certainly had quite a busy few days with the Crown Prince concluding what many have dubbed as an historic visit to Washington, D.C. Frankly speaking, in your view, what was the main highlight of the visit?
Right, it's good to be with you again, Katie. So I really do believe that the Crown Prince's visit to the United States marks a new chapter in a long-standing relationship. So this is a relationship that goes back 80 years. It is multidimensional. It's always included political cooperation on a number of fronts. It's always included security and military cooperation. And from the get-go, the economic component of the relationship, the trade between the two countries, has been a pillar of the relationship from the start, as I said. And I think all of these dimensions were really highlighted when His Highness visited. So there were a number of agreements that were signed, including a strategic defense agreement. There was an agreement on the use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. There was an agreement on artificial intelligence. There was also an agreement on educational cooperation and coordination. And so, like I said, this is a mutually beneficial relationship that has endured, not only endured, but I'd argue that it's continued to evolve over time.
And there were so many different parts to this visit. It did seem to go very well. You mentioned some of the deals there as well. We saw President Trump referring to His Highness as a very good friend. Given that the defence cooperation dominated so much of the coverage, I want to talk a little bit about that defence deal. Tell me, are you as a government satisfied with it, and now the designation as a major non-NATO ally?
Right. So I think that, again, the cooperation between Saudi Arabia and the United States on security and military affairs has been a pillar of the relationship really for decades. As you know, unfortunately, we do live in a dangerous neighborhood. And as far as we're concerned, we have no higher priority than making sure that our people are safe and our borders are secure. And the United States has been our main strategic partner, again, when it comes to strategic and security and military affairs. And the agreement that was signed and announced the other day will ensure that we continue to work closely to make sure, again, that our people are safe and our borders are secure.
Of course, any major deal with Washington does raise some questions about longevity, though. Does the kingdom have any concern that these commitments might not survive beyond President Trump's current term, particularly considering the unpredictability of US foreign policy continuity?
So that's the thing about the relationship is, as I said at the outset, it dates back 80 years. And in that time, it's continued to not only has it endured, but it's really been able to flourish and to deepen and to strengthen and to broaden over.
But not always. I mean, we saw President Biden, when he was trying to be elected, he talked about turning Saudi Arabia into a pariah state. We're now seeing a very different approach.
Right. So the reality is that even under President Biden, the relationship was on pretty solid footing. We were in constant contact. Sorry?
I would say by the end, it was a lot more solid. It started out quite shaky.
Right. I mean, we're looking at we're taking the long view here. The long view is over the past 80 years or so, regardless of who was in the White House, the relationship has been on a steady trajectory in the sense that it's not only deepened, it's deepened, broadened, and strengthened under both Democratic and Republican administration. That is true when it comes to economic cooperation and trade. That is true when it comes to military cooperation and security cooperation. I mean, the thing that I think people sometimes overlook is that not only have Saudi Arabia and the United States fought two wars side by side. The first was in 1990 when we helped, you know, liberate Kuwait from
Mm.
Saddam Hussein's troops, and then we again worked very closely to expel the terrorist group ISIS from Iraq and Syria. In between all of that, we have ongoing military training, joint military exercises, and those certainly have always taken place under
Mhm.
both the Republican and Democratic administrations. We've also, regardless of who's been in the White House, we've always worked on trying to resolve some of the political issues and challenges and crises in the region, whether it's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, whether it's the conflict in Syria over the years, some of the challenges, certainly the conflict in Yemen. And that has been steady and ongoing regardless of who was in the White House.
Mhm. So you feel this defense deal will stick regardless of who is in the White House?
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's, one of the things that I think became very apparent during this visit is that President Trump and frankly, even previous administrations, I think there's a realization in the United States that Saudi Arabia occupies a very unique and important position in the Arab world as the Arab world's biggest economy. But I think just as importantly, Saudi Arabia obviously has also a unique, I would say, argue a leadership position in the broader Islamic world. I think that there's an expectation among Arab majority nations, an expectation among Muslim majority nations
Mhm.
for Saudi Arabia to play a leadership role in trying to resolve and address some of the challenges that these two communities face.
Mm.
We've long embraced this expectation and this leadership role, and I think that there's a realization here in the United States that for the Middle East to enjoy peace and prosperity, Saudi Arabia has to play a very important role.
Mm.
We are a force for good. We play a very important mediating role between nations and sometimes between factions within nations. We've done that for decades, going all the way back to the civil war in Lebanon. So I think that was very obvious
Mm.
to me, at least, that President Trump and his administration and previous administrations really appreciate what Saudi Arabia brings to the
Mm.
table in terms of promoting regional security, in terms of promoting, well, trade with the United States, and also in terms of pushing back against, radical non-state militant actors in the region.
And we are certainly seeing Saudi Arabia play a much bigger role, not just regionally, but I think internationally on the international negotiation, mediation stage as well. Time magazine this week, an interesting article saying this visit really proves that Saudi Arabia is now too powerful to ignore. But I want to dig a little bit deeper on the defence package. There's one detail in particular that stood out. There were several mentions of the F-35 fighter jets in particular. Now, President Trump didn't mince his words. He said the aircraft will be delivered to Saudi Arabia. Tell me, do you have any details so far on that? Do you have a timeline? Have you been told of any conditions or restrictions attached to the jets at all?
Right. So we typically don't speak about the specifics of, defense agreements and defense packages or, particular defensive platforms. What I can tell you is that obviously, and as I already mentioned, the this is an ongoing conversation that we're having with the administration. We are continuing to have it. We will make sure that that our needs are met. And again, as I said earlier, we have really no higher priority than making sure our people are safe and our borders are secure. We will make sure that we are in possession of the most advanced weapons to meet our security and national security needs. And as you know, like I said, we live in a dangerous neighborhood, and just the world we live in is ever evolving. The security threats are ever evolving. The United States happens to be our primary partner when it comes to security and military cooperation. And so this is an ongoing conversation, and it's been going on for decades, and it's been mutually beneficial. And like I said,
Okay,
I think the
and
United States really.
even if you can't go through the details, though, do you have a timeline on this? Because if it does go ahead, it would be hugely, I think, not only successful but really have a big impact in the region. I believe that Israel is the only other country to receive these jets so far. So Saudi Arabia would be the second country in the region. Do you have an idea on that timeline?
I don't have a specific timeline, but what I can tell you is, and based on obviously the statement that was issued a couple of days ago from the Ministry of Defense and our counterparts here in the United States, the conversation is going very well, and we will continue to have the conversation and make sure that our defense and security needs are met.
And do you expect the F-35 sale to clear Congress, given the scrutiny that arms deals to the region often face?
Right. So I don't really, I don't want to preempt anything, but what I can say is that we've had, for decades, we've managed to sign very important strategic security agreements and defense agreements and procure defense systems and platforms from the United States. And we will continue to do whatever is necessary and to have a conversation with, whether if there's members in Congress who have questions, we've always managed to address them. And most of the deals that we've negotiated over the past have gone through.
Okay, well, let's move on, shall we? Beyond defence, the other key part of the visit was cooperation on energy and technology. Washington and Riyadh have confirmed they will work together in nuclear energy and critical minerals as well. Tell me, what will that actually look like in practice?
Right, so Saudi Arabia is becoming a hub for artificial intelligence. I think that when people talk about artificial intelligence, sometimes the broader conversation, what is sometimes often missed is the fact that it requires a lot of space, but it also requires a lot of energy, and Saudi Arabia has both in abundance, and we certainly have the political will. We believe that artificial intelligence will hold the key to meeting a lot of the challenges that we as an international community face. It's already beginning to change the way people live, the way people work, the way that we learn and study. It obviously has tremendous applications in healthcare and otherwise. So we are moving, forward with that. The United States, American companies happen to be on the leading edge of this technology. So there was a number of announcements that were made back in May, but also over the past couple of days between primarily Saudi Arabia's Humane, which is our primary artificial intelligence company, but also with some of the biggest leaders here in the United States, with NVIDIA, AMD, Cisco, I believe, but also Elon Musk's xAI.
And of course, we now saw the news just a day or so ago that they are going to be shipping NVIDIA chips out here as well. Big progress, certainly Humane signing a number of big deals with US companies as well. And Elon Musk attending that big fancy White House dinner as well, alongside Tim Cook and Ronaldo. I was interested to see. But let me ask you a little bit more when it comes to energy, particularly nuclear energy. Big progress there thanks to this visit. There are some observers who might question why Saudi Arabia even needs nuclear energy, given its position as one of the world's largest oil producers and a major investor in renewables. So how does that make financial sense to the kingdom?
No, it makes perfect sense because, as you correctly said, Katie, Saudi Arabia is diversifying its energy mix. So over the past few years, we have been investing heavily in producing renewable clean energy. So solar is one where we're investing and improving and increasing our capacity year by year. Wind is another source of renewable, again, where we're investing and producing and beginning to get some of that energy to meet our domestic energy needs. We're also producing green and blue hydrogen. So we're diversifying our energy mix for a couple of reasons. One of them is to mitigate the impact of climate change. We believe that climate change is a very real threat. And so we are investing heavily in all of these renewables. Nuclear energy is obviously a renewable, clean energy. So it makes perfect sense for us to do that. The other thing that, again, I think people sometimes overlook is Saudi Arabia's population essentially has increased by sevenfold from 1970 to last year. I think our population was all of 5 million in 1970. In 1970, last year we had our most comprehensive census conducted, and our population actually crossed 35 million. So that's a sevenfold increase. With that increase, obviously, has come tremendous demand on our energy needs. So we have, like I said, multiple reasons why we are diversifying the energy mix, and nuclear energy has to be part of that mix for sure.
Of course, the other major headline we saw is the US-backed resolution for a pathway to a Palestinian state. Now, Saudi, as we know, has been lobbying extensively for a long time for the two-state solution. Now, the American opposition has always been that a Palestinian state comes at the end of the negotiation. Tell me, this is a massive shift in policy. What has led to that change, and was Riyadh key in driving that shift?
Well, Saudi Arabia's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been clear and consistent for decades. After all, it was the late King Abdullah who, all the way back in 2002, presented what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative. And the initiative basically offers Israel normalization, not just with Saudi Arabia, but with all 21 member nations of the League of Arab Nations, in return for a full and comprehensive peace with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. So that offer is still on the table. Obviously, over the past couple of years, the carnage, the crisis in Gaza was unfortunately, a huge step backwards for us. And again, by us, I mean the broader international community. We're definitely glad that, we appreciate the role that the U.S. administration played, the role of Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey in bringing the Gaza crisis to an end. We are supportive of the administration's Gaza plan. But ultimately, long term, we do believe that there's no alternative to a two-state solution. And we'll continue to work with the United States. We'll continue to work with our partners in the region in advocating and promoting that vision.
Sure, but what led to the big change in the US approach?
I mean, I obviously I don't speak on behalf of the United States, but I think the just the suffering that everybody saw unfold in Gaza over the past 2 years. And, maybe I've said this before in my previous appearances, uh, but I will say it again. I mean, I think the broader Middle East is going to have a very difficult time enjoying any semblance of peace and prosperity and stability without resolving this, dispute once and for all. So not only has it brought a lot of pain and suffering to both Palestinians and Israelis, but it's also been kind of exploited by some of the most radical elements in the region, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and others. So we've long maintained that for this region to enjoy peace and stability, this core dispute has to be resolved. And again, you don't have to be a historian of the region. Obviously, the media covered the carnage, the destruction, the deaths in Gaza, and that's just not sustainable. It's not this cannot go on indefinitely. And we're certainly hopeful that people in Israel, the leadership there realizes this, that the only just and sensible way forward is to sit down with the Palestinian leadership. And granted, both sides will have to make difficult decisions, but we really don't see an alternative because, unfortunately, even if this conflict, periodically it does quiet down, and I think the international community loses sight of it, loses track of it, and I think again we as the international community assume, well, maybe it's things are quiet, but sooner or later, unfortunately, you always have an explosion of violence sooner or later. So this is
Sure.
not
And
sustainable. It cannot go on indefinitely.
and I agree with you, but we're over 2 years in, and right now I feel like there's a fundamental problem here because both Israel and Hamas have already rejected the resolution. So how do you chart a realistic path to a Palestinian state when the main actors on the ground oppose the framework the US has endorsed? I think otherwise this news this week would have been seen as a major accomplishment in persuading Washington not to veto the decision at last.
Yeah, so our main interlocutors in Palestine is the Palestinian Authority. So they've been supportive and they've also undergone reforms. We believe that they have the capacity to rule in both the West Bank and Gaza, and that is the vision that we have. But ultimately, I mean, you are correct. I think both the Palestinians and the Israelis have to make difficult decisions going forward, and we'll continue to work with the United States. We're going to continue to work with our Palestinian partners, with our neighbors in the region, to try to push this forward because we really just don't see any alternative.
All right. Well, the Crown Prince also raised another urgent crisis during the visit, this time over Sudan. Now, President Trump said that Sudan really wasn't on his radar before the Crown Prince really pressed him to act, but he's now said he would start working to end the war. Tell me, public pledges are one thing. What are the concrete steps that you expect Washington to take, and what outcome would the kingdom accept?
Right. So, as we already mentioned, I think you mentioned it earlier, Saudi Arabia does play a unique role in the region in terms of helping mediate, the various crises. So we believe that there's tremendous potential in every single Arab country, no exception. We felt that way about Syria for a long time. We felt that there's tremendous potential in Lebanon. There's tremendous potential in Sudan. There's potential in Yemen. the principles that we apply and adhere to apply are basically consistent in all of these, crisis zones. We believe in supporting, internationally recognized state institutions. We believe in political resolution. We don't believe that military solutions is the way forward in any of these, crises. And so we've been advocating, we've been keeping a channel open. Certainly, we've been very supportive of that. For just as an example, we've been very supportive of the transition in Syria with the new leadership and
Sure,
the new
but if I
president
can,
there.
forgive me for interrupting you, but if I can
Sure.
press you, what are the concrete steps that you expect the US administration to take when it comes to trying to end the war in Sudan?
Right. So again, I can't really speak on behalf of the United States, but
Okay,
we are
well, what
working
would the
closely with the
kingdom
United
accept
States.
then? What would
Yeah.
the kingdom see as a successful attempt, at least?
Right. So a successful attempt is obviously to bring the destruction and the fighting to an end. Obviously, the conflict over the past 2 years has been the deaths, the displacement of people, potentially by the millions, according to some figures, has been terrible. But Saudi Arabia, again, from the beginning, has been able to and has tried to mediate between the two main factions. We're working very closely with some of our neighbors, again, to try to put a political resolution on the table. And again, that's the way forward as far as we're concerned. So we'll continue to have, an open channel of dialogue with not just with the United States, but some of our partners in the region, because again, this is a conflict that has brought a lot of pain and suffering. It's also created a refugee problem. And again, all of these countries, all of our neighbor countries have tremendous potential.
Okay, well,
All of these,
on that, is
yeah.
Saudi Arabia prepared to take a more direct role, diplomatically or otherwise, to help stabilize Sudan?
Yeah, and we have been there from the get-go. We had representatives from both factions come to Saudi Arabia shortly after the beginning of the conflict a couple of years ago. And that was what is known as the Jeddah process. And obviously, we will continue to push and promote for dialogue and a peaceful resolution of the conflict. We believe that's the only way forward.
Okay, well, let me change direction a little bit. And obviously, working on that crisis has to be a huge priority, I think, for all of us. Sudan's now become one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world. But let me go back to a slightly different subject, the economic side of the partnership between the US and Saudi. Again, some big announcements over the last few days. Saudi Arabia has announced plans to increase its investments in the United States, I think around from $600 billion to around $1 trillion over time. But let me ask, given current oil prices and domestic priorities back home, does the kingdom actually have the fiscal space to make that pledge credible?
Right, I think that we do. And again, when we talk about whether it's 600 billion or $1 trillion, and I think His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, made that clear when he was at the Oval Office, that these pledges, these investments, these are mutually beneficial relationships. And that's the thing about the U.S.-Saudi relationship, specific in general, but specifically when it comes to the economic dimension, when it comes to the trade, when it comes to the investment. This has been mutually beneficial from the get-go. So, a company, an American company like Bechtel, Pepsi, GE, GM have been in Saudi Arabia for decades. And now you have the new giants, you have the Amazons, the Ciscos, the Googles, who are leading our current transformation. And whether we're talking about, Bechtel 80 years ago or Amazon, over the past couple of years, the relationship, like I said, is mutually beneficial. And the model has been fairly consistent in the sense that American companies come to Saudi Arabia, they set up offices, they set up factories, they employ Saudis, they share know-how, they share expertise. And so there's, like I said, it's a win-win as far as we're concerned. And we are going to invest in the United States for sure. But like I said, it's not just pure investments one way. It's really kind of two-way trade, two-way investments, where everybody comes out a winner at the end, we believe.
Again, within that, how much of this investment will be driven by government spending versus the Saudi private sector?
Well, we're hoping that, and this is our vision for Saudi Arabia domestically in terms of how our economy is structured, but certainly even when it comes to foreign investment. We want to, and we've tried to empower the private sector over the past few years. We do have a number of funds, and the Public Investment Fund has been supportive of a number of sectors over the past couple of years. But we do definitely, in terms of what the regulations, setting up
Mm.
just the investment ecosystem, the economy in general in Saudi Arabia. We've tried to empower the private sector in any way that we can by streamlining regulations, by making capital more affordable,
Mm.
by making it easier for foreign investors to come in. I mean, that's a big part of Vision 2030, and direct foreign investment has been going up consistently, and a big chunk of it, I don't remember the exact figure in terms of percentage, but a big percentage of it is going, or rather coming from American companies. I believe that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, when President Trump was in the kingdom back in May, said that there's 1,300 American companies doing business in Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
I fully anticipate that number to actually increase over
Mm.
time. And again, whether we're talking about huge companies or new emerging companies, this is all good as far as we're concerned. And this applies to Saudi companies as well. So we have huge companies like Aramco and SABIC, and those have evolved and continue to grow over the years. But also, we've empowered our SME sectors, the small and medium enterprises, many of whom, by the way, have been established by women. I think
Mm.
40% of SMEs are actually
Wow.
last year were established by women.
Mm.
So we're empowering all, business leaders, whether you're a small business, whether you're Saudi owned or you have foreign partners. We've tried to empower the private sector in every way to thrive domestically,
Mm.
but also we want them to expand
Mm.
globally. And I see this myself. I travel to the kingdom quite a bit, and I do meet with, business leaders and
Mm.
leaders at Aramco and SABIC, but I also periodically do run into, leaders or business owners that own small and new businesses. But I can tell you, Katie, I mean, nobody thinks locally anymore. I
Mhm.
think every business owner thinks globally right off the bat. And, we have the tools now, they have the tools to sell their goods and services all around the world. And that's, I
Mm.
think, what makes this, the age that we live in so interesting and so
Mm.
exciting. And that's certainly the case in Saudi Arabia with Vision 2030, because we've created all of these, new sectors from the ground up, whether it's tourism,
Absolutely. And I
entertainment.
would say you can very much
Yeah.
feel it on the ground. I notice even whenever I attend FII, I see a lot more American business people that I end up bumping into there as well. So it's something you can really see each day when you're actually in there. Final question for me. We've had the pleasure of speaking several times. You've joined us through various phases of the partnership between the US and Saudi. I mentioned earlier we saw President Trump on this trip calling the Crown Prince, referring to him as a very good friend, heaping a lot of praise on him throughout the week. Would you agree with the assessment that the US-Saudi relationship really does seem to be at its strongest point in decades?
I do, definitely. And again, I think this was on display
Mm.
with all the different agreements that were signed. And like you said, whether we're talking about FAI in Riyadh
Mm.
or the investment forum that was held right here in Washington,
Mm.
D.C., I think that there's excitement in both, in the United States and in Riyadh. I think that American companies realize that there's maybe more opportunities in Saudi Arabia than anywhere else in the world. I think, as far as we're concerned, we still value, obviously, the relationship with the United States. We value what American companies bring to the table. Again, where they are, American companies are still at the forefront of all of these technologies that are kind of redefining the world that we live in. So,
Mm.
as I said at the outset, this is a relationship that is enduring, and it's enduring for many, many reasons. It's been mutually beneficial for both countries. It's helped advance our national security interests, but it's also, I believe, that it's also helped advance the national security
Mm.
interests of the United States, and that's according to successive U.S. administrations. And I think, to his credit, when the president spoke, I think Sam had some very kind words, not just about His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. It's very obvious that the two leaders appreciate what they're doing in their respective countries. But I think the president also, it's become very clear, really appreciates what Saudi Arabia brings to the table regionally. But he's seen some of these changes unfold in the kingdom over the past 7, 8 years, and I think he talked about that when he was in the kingdom in
Mm.
May.
Yeah.
And you said that yourself, Katie. I mean, you see the transformation in Saudi Arabia is so
Yeah.
rapid, it is so
Mm.
breathtaking
Mm.
that if you spend a month in Saudi Arabia or a couple of weeks sometimes,
Mm.
you will see these changes kind of unfolding right before your eyes. So right, this is a relationship that is enduring. It is well worth maintaining. It is, I agree with you. It is this is the best that it's been, and we fully anticipate that it will continue to strengthen and to deepen over the future.
Very well said. And yes, I always say the only reason, the only way to really appreciate the transformation is actually spending time in the kingdom and seeing it firsthand. Thank you so much for your time today, Mr. Nazer. Lovely to be able to speak with you, and we do appreciate you joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Katie. Thank you.